Hello there and welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and of course it's my privilege to be your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now today I'm going to share some knowledge with you, or in fact more precisely I'm going to share the source of some knowledge with you, because I'm often asked by people through the comments and in emails, which I always encourage, where do you get your interest in men's style and where do you glean your knowledge? How do you have such seemingly an expansive understanding of men's style and etiquette and so on? And the truth is, my journey through life is individual, the same as yours, but mine has led to me getting to a point today where I have an interest and a sort of library of knowledge around the topic which I find myself chatting to you with quite frequently. And yes, I have gained a lot of information from books over the years. If you watch my channel frequently, you'll have heard me saying over and over again, self-development is a vital part of every gentleman's repertoire of skills. And for me, the best way to develop oneself is through reading, the sort of imbibing of knowledge. And you can do it a little bit every day. If you just read a few pages of a book every day over a period of time, you will have absorbed a great deal of knowledge. But on my own journey, of acquiring knowledge of men's style and so on, it really began as a young person, because growing up in my household in the 1970s, I looked up to my father, who used to get dressed up to go out and still does. This morning I took my mum and dad to the supermarket, right, to do some shopping. My father is a gentleman of 91 years of age, and he was going merely to the supermarket today, and he wore a collar and tie because he was going outdoors where he was going to be seen by other people, and to him, standards are standards. If you're going to the supermarket, whether you're going to any other social environment, you dress in a way in which is going to represent you as a gentleman in the best possible light. So he wears a collar and tie. And I grew up watching that, seeing my father demonstrate those perhaps now old-fashioned ways of thinking about dressing well. Whilst I was at home, of course, and looking at my father and his generation being well dressed, I then went to school. And at 11 years of age, I went to a secondary school in which we all wore a blazer, a collar and a tie. So I was introduced to a sort of what would be today be considered quite a formal manner of dressing, just as an 11-year-old. My dad taught me how to do a Windsor knot, to do up my little tie to go to school when I was merely 11. While still a child, I went to the Air Cadets, the military youth cadet force. And again, I was introduced to a uniform for the first time, other than my school uniform, but, a sort of military uniform. And from there, I joined the Royal Air Force as a 17-year-old and began a 10-year career in the military, which is, of course, all about, hierarchy, etiquette, uniform standards. Standards. My life has always been in this sort of vein. And as I've grown older, I come to appreciate it even more, how it helps me stand apart from the other people I encounter on a daily basis, because I take the effort to dress well. Now, understanding men's style, and some would say understanding the right thing to wear at the right time and what you should and shouldn't mix and match within your clothing, is something of an acquired piece of knowledge. But to help me on my journey, of course, as I say, self-development, it's all about reading. And I have, of all the books I have, and I have quite a few, on men's style, I have cut it down to the top 5. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of these books today, because these books, I think, would be incredibly valuable and useful for you if you're on a journey towards Chap Nirvana. So, let me tell you about the books which have changed my style life. Now, the first book I'm going to recommend to you is the one right here. It's called Dressing the Man, with the subtitle of Mastering the Art of Permanent Fashion, and it's by Alan Flusser. Now, when it comes to any book, in which you receive advice from the author, you need to be sure that that advice is well qualified. And Alan Flusser's reputation certainly satisfies us on that front, because Alan Flusser is a bit of an icon, an American. I believe he's active in New York, and I think he still has a studio in which he designs clothing. He's effectively a designer, a bespoke tailor, and he designs clothing for movies. I think most famously he designed the costume or the outfits which Michael Douglas wore in the film Wall Street, which is is emblematic of the 1980s and the power dressing style, with the sort of contrasted collared shirts, bold ties, sharply cut suits. So that's Flusser's sort of background. And he wrote this book in 2002, which is seemingly a long time ago, 20 years you might think. A lot of water has passed under the bridge in that time. However, this book, as well as being the largest book I'm going to talk to you about today, it is by far the one which has the greatest depth of interest. Even though it's written from an American mindset, I think it's very relevant. There's lots of information here on the history of clothing. The chapters cover everything that the gentleman may need to know, who perhaps is starting off from scratch or who is looking to improve their style. There are lots of images in here which relate back to the most classically dressed men of all time. The Duke of Windsor, Cary Grant, all of these great heroes, but also perhaps more modern as well. There's a lot of reference in here to the mastery of colour and how it can be incorporated in one's clothing to the best possible visual effect and the overall effect upon your ensemble. If there's one book which I'm going to recommend today, which you might find the most useful, it's probably going to be Dressing the Man by Alan Flusser. It's very widely available. I think I paid under £25 for this book on eBay. Sorry, not eBay, Amazon. So it's still available on Amazon, still in print, and it's absolutely one of the best books on men's style, which I think you will invest your money in. And it also looks great on the coffee table at home as well, if you want to show off to people. But certainly top of my list. Now, my second literary suggestion for you stylish gentlemen is actually a book which steps away from style for a moment, and this one is called Men and Manners by David Goggins. It was written in 2018, so it's quite more up to date. I paid, I think, let me check, £14 for this book from Amazon again, and as the title suggests, the focus of this book is on more about the manners which maketh the man rather than the style. Now, it's written again from an American viewpoint. I believe David Goggins is a journalist who's active in the style world in New York. So again, that New York mentality. But what I like about this book is that it is a collection of case studies, of excerpts, of essays, lots of information about how to conduct yourself in the situations that life will throw at you. Those obstacles which really do, make the difference between the well-mannered gentleman and the oaf on the street. Lots of things like how to deal with conflict, how to deal with tipping and gratuities, how to, overcome issues involving loud noises from your neighbours or other issues like that. Very interesting. There is a lot of style stuff woven throughout the book as well, but it makes a good read. It can almost be read like a novel, not as a reference point. And within here, not so much in the way of images, but it's nice and easy to read. Lots of advice here, like no square-toed shoes. So there is some style advice, as I say, woven within the book. A nice little read and well worth adding to your style book library if you're interested in rounding out that knowledge. Okay, now my third suggestion for you brings us right up to date. This book was written in 2021 and it was written by a chap called Nick Wheeler. Now, Nick Wheeler, or if I was to say his full name, you'd know who he is. His name is Nick Charles Tyrwhitt Wheeler. Yes, it's the man behind Charles Tyrwhitt, the global menswear empire, which started off making shirts very well and now has branched up into suits and all other manner of clothing as well, from formal to casual. So a great deal of knowledge and expertise behind this book, is contained within the author. And as the title suggests, the Modern Gentleman's Handbook. That is exactly what this is. This book could be given to a young person starting off in life, and it has all of the information that you need to turn yourself from the raw material into a well-mannered, well-dressed young gentleman. Or at any stage of your life, if you're looking to up your game, to level up your style, your etiquette and everything. And it's a very interesting book because it's written, the chapters encompass everything. From giving suggestions about how to dress, from the very formal situations to the most casual, even how to dress for a funeral. Those bits of information and advice which are hard to come by unless you've already encountered those scenarios. There's all stuff that what you would normally expect. You know, the first couple of chapters, clearly they're going to cover things like shirts because it's from predominantly a shirt manufacturer. But there's loads of other information and advice in there as well about how to deal with situations like being a good house guest, how to drink in an appropriate manner when you're out socially, and many other situations in here. From the bizarre, you know, as I say, right up to how to dress and behave in a funeral, and lots of other things as well. How to, you know, steer conversations in the way that you would like, away from politics, celebrities and things like that. How to be, as I say, a great house guest, and on and on and on. How to stay fit and healthy. A really great book. I actually recommended this book as one of my Christmas gift guide for last year because I think if you know anybody in your life who's embarking on a journey to be a young gentleman, or at any age, not necessarily young, this is going to be the Modern Gentleman's Handbook, as it says. Very modestly priced. Let me check. What did it cost? £10. I tell you what, that is a bargain for £10 and it's worth putting on your shelf. Okay, now my penultimate book is, as you can see, True Style, The History and Principles of Classic Menswear by G. Bruce Boyer. And I've had this book for around about a year. And again, very modestly priced. Let me check. £14 from Amazon. Hardback. Looks great on the coffee table again. And it's another book of American origin. The author, Boyer, is a style journalist and magazine contributor of many years' experience, who in this book has provided a publication which makes you feel as if you're sat down next to a cosy fire with an older relative or friend who you can ask advice about clothing and style. And there's a heavy focus, as the title suggests, in history. Because I believe, and I always incorporate this into the videos in which we share, if you understand the history about an item or a piece of clothing, you will understand its origins, where it comes from, and where it stands in the modern world. If you can understand an item, you will then have more confidence when you wear it. It will make you feel much better about the clothing you wear if you know the journey it's been on and the fact that it's appropriate and the right thing to wear for the situation which you're in. And this book covers a swathe of subjects, much like the others really, but this one is history heavy. It gives us lots of information about the items themselves and the social history behind them. And it incorporates things like sprezzatura, the background and the understanding behind that. You know, the way that fits into clothing and how people elect to use it. It's got items on there about, you know, like Ivy League styling, formal, casual, and of course all of the standard things like, you know, ties and shirts and cravats and things like that. But this one, again, it's one of the books which I read a bit like a novel. You can sit down and read your way through it and you feel like you're on a journey through men's style. And when you finish reading it, it's also there as a reference book for the future. If you need to go back to refresh your knowledge or top up your style, it's there for you. And it looks great too, which is always handy with a book which you're going to put on a shelf or leave on your coffee table. But True Style, well worth having in the collection. Well, we've come down to my final book suggestion, and this one is the oldest one today, and it is called New Dress for Success by John T. Malloy. Now this book well, I should say Dress for Success. The original book was published in 1975, and this updated version was published in 1988, so it's quite a bit old. It's been around for a long time. I turned 18 in 1988, and a lot of water has gone under that bridge since then. You might think, how valid can a book that old be in the modern world? And it's surprising how much of style is cyclical. Now, John T. Malloy has written a book which is firmly set in its time. You know, the 1980s, when this book came out, you will remember as a time of power dressing, of the excesses of the 1980s and 90s. But a lot of the information captured in this book is still very relevant today, because this book contains a lot of psychology. Malloy was one of the first people who understood the value of power dressing and how the way that you dress can be leveraged, weaponized in a way to improve your social and economic and business situation. You know, how dressing well can influence other people. And this is ground zero. This is where that mindset really began. And within this book, Malloy uses many case studies where he undertook social experiments to prove that certain, theories he had were effective. And I use them today, still use some of the elements of these experiments today in many of my videos when I use examples. Give you an example. In one of the experiments in the book, Malloy sets out to prove that the necktie has an impact on people in the modern world. So he employed a young man, a model, and he got him to go out in the public, outside a bus station, I believe it was, in America, and basically to panhandle, to beg for money from people saying that he'd lost his wallet and he wanted to get some fare money to get home. On day one, he sent the young man out without a tie, totally tieless, and he got, like $8 off the people he approached. The following day, the same young man, the same time of day, they repeated the experiment, but on the second occasion, he wore a tie. And on that second time, he had something like 3 times the amount of money offered to him by strangers, and the only alteration in the appearance was the necktie, showing that the necktie, if leveraged, can certainly have an impact on the people you meet and the way that they will respond to you. And this book is jam-packed with information like that. Now, don't get me wrong, some of the illustrations in here are definitely of their era, of the 1980s, but it's so much fun to read. It's no longer in print, actually, and I picked this copy up recently from Amazon for £5. And it's a great book, big, nice, thick read, lots of images, but lots of easy to read information in there too. So I highly recommend that one if you can get your hands on it. For the amount of money it costs, there is so much information in there that can help you leverage your clothing to better effect in your life. So there we go, gentlemen. Those were my top 5 books, which have certainly helped me no end in my journey to Chap Nirvana. Because if you have knowledge, you have power. And whether that's relevant to your workplace or your social life, it's definitely relevant to the way that you dress. If you understand men's style, you're going to look better, you'll have more confidence, and in turn, that will make you a more successful individual, irrespective of what path you're taking through life. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, I would encourage you to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget, if you like the material, click the red button, come on the journey as a subscriber. If you'd like to practically support the channel, you can do so by buying me a coffee. And if you go into the show notes, you'll find a link to the Buy Me a Coffee page, and I would be delighted if you supported us that way. So until the next time, take care of yourselves. Keep your self-development going by reading as often as you can. And I will see you again very soon.